So we certainly had an eventful election period, and there's still a hair of doubt given legal challenges on the result. But it looks like we're headed for Joe Biden being president of the United States, but the Republicans, by a hair, continuing to run the Senate. And what that means is that we will get some flavor of a Biden presidency, but those who watch U.S. politics will understand that the Senate has a lot of power to block and prevent some of the more dramatic changes in U.S. policy. For investors, that means that we will likely still get a stimulus bill. In fact, we may even see one in December before the new president takes office. But it could be a bit scaled down from the $2 trillion or so that the Democrats were seeking, perhaps somewhere in the $1 to $1.5 trillion range. And that's why we've seen bond yields actually drift a little bit softer on anticipation that perhaps government financing needs won't be as strong. The equity market actually may like this combination because if we get that stimulus package, it is good for the economy. But what looks less obvious is that we're going to get some other items in the Biden agenda that weren't as favorable for equity markets. And in particular, I'm speaking about the plan to raise corporate taxes. That's something that a Republican Senate is likely to block, as well as perhaps some of the personal tax increases on high-income individuals that the Biden administration might have otherwise pressed for. Even on other policy files, things like energy policy, climate change, well, we will still see a drift in that direction because some of that is in the hands of states. And as we saw under the Trump administration, the president can do a lot in terms of regulatory policy changes that affect things like the energy sector. On other matters, you do need legislation. And again, we're expecting a slower turn there. So a bit less drama on the public policy front for individual equity sectors like alternative energy that was seen, for example, as a winner had the Democrats swept this election, and perhaps U.S. oil companies being less concerned politically. For Canada's energy sector, we have to remember that Biden was an opponent to the Keystone XL pipeline, but there's not necessarily a clear blocking of that yet. On the other side of it, tougher regulations on U.S. shale oil production is actually a little bit of a positive for Canada by leveling the playing field in the oil and gas sector and perhaps reducing the competitive threat to Canadian oil producers from a return of more shale oil production as the global economy recovers. We're still going to be watching now for how the new administration responds on the other key issue, and that's the coronavirus. It's still true that the virus is the number one threat to economic growth globally and in the US, and we can hope that a more concerted effort to centrally manage some of the response to that virus and contain it can help the US avoid what we're seeing now in Europe, which is a need for a deeper economic shutdown again to bring things under control. So those are the files worth watching most closely. The stimulus bill coming up, which we do expect we'll still see one, as well as when the new administration take over, can they do a better job containing the coronavirus than we've seen so far? And further down the road, of course, managing that all-important process of getting a vaccine out and into American arms, because that will be the shot in the arm for the U.S. economy and by extension, the Canadian economy as well.